This happened on the night of Easter Sunday. My older brother and I had been roommates for a few years, living in an apartment about a 15-minute walk away from our parents. Every year, we would walk there to have dinner with our parents for Easter. Our apartment and our parents' house were separated by a fairly large park, but a trail went straight through it, which crossed under a bridge at about the halfway mark. It was early in the evening when my brother and I made our way through the park toward our parents. We weren't the only people out there, but it was becoming very empty. By the time we made it to the bridge, we hadn't seen anyone in a few minutes. That's when we started hearing something moving in the bushes. We both stopped and looked all around, trying to see where the rustling was coming from. Sometimes, we would get to see a raccoon or something crawling out of a bush, but we didn't find anything. After a few seconds, we kept walking and passed under the bridge, and when we came out the other side, we heard a whistle. It sounded like it was a person whistling, not a bird or anything. We just ignored it and kept walking, picking up the pace quite a bit to exit the park as soon as possible. We eventually made it to our parents' place a few minutes later, but by then, we were able to joke about how we'd gotten so spooked out by essentially nothing. We soon forgot about it as we had Easter dinner with our family and stayed for a few hours to catch up and hang out with everyone. Once it was starting to get late, people started to head home, so my brother and I followed suit. While saying our goodbyes, I talked with my brother about getting an Uber home and avoiding the walk through the pathway since it was late. He told me I was overreacting and convinced me that nothing would happen, and so we left the house and re-entered the park. As we were walking, it was pitch black. There weren't any streetlights around, so we had to use the flashlights from our phones to guide us home. I never walked through the park this late at night and had always found it relaxing and peaceful, but without light, the whole place was creepy as hell. I was about to say something to my brother about how we should have gotten a ride, but just at that moment, we heard something nearby. It was the same rustling sounds we heard before, but in the darkness, so it felt twice as loud. A few seconds later, we heard the whistle again too. A chill ran down my spine, and I know my brother felt it too. That's when we both started speed walking down the path. We knew we were almost halfway home when we saw the bridge, but we didn't slow down. We walked into the tunnel and hurried to the other side, making it out in half the time it usually took us. Getting out of there never felt so relieving. That is until we heard the whistle again. This time, it sounded like it was right behind us. We looked over our shoulders at the same time and saw it. There stood a man standing at the other side of the tunnel. He was dressed as the Easter Bunny, but he was holding an axe. Something about the sight of him made us stop dead in our tracks. Frozen with fear, we looked at him, then at each other, then back at him, trying to make sense of it.
What's up with that guy? Maybe he works at the mall? Sure, because every kid wants a picture with the Easter Bunny about to chop their head off. Oh shit. Yo, let's get out of here. Damn it, my ankle! Shit, get up! Get up! I can't! Shit, he's running towards us! Stay away! Stay away! Help!
I didn't want to leave my brother behind, but I didn't have a choice. I had to get to safety and call for help. When I made it out of the park, I called the police, and then my parents. Minutes later, the police arrived and escorted me back to where we were attacked. By then, it was a nightmare. There was blood everywhere, and my brother's body had been completely destroyed, hacked to pieces and scattered across the pavement. All that, but no sign of the Bunny Man. There have been no arrests since it happened. It was labeled as an urban legend on the internet, but those people act like my brother wasn't murdered. They act like I don't still hear his screams every night, like I didn't listen to his voice getting further away as I ran while he was begging for his life. For this Easter, it was only fitting that we revisit the infamous Bunny Man Bridge urban legend. For those of you who haven't heard of the Bunny Man, he was a notorious killer that wore a white rabbit suit, and at the stroke of midnight, Lore has it that if you speak his name 3 times, he'll appear. Bunny Man, Bunny Man, Bunny Man, but don't expect to survive. He'll slash your throat and leave your body dangling from the bridge. Another rendition of the Bunny Man was that he was a spirit of an escaped mental patient who haunts the railroad bridge, living in the woods near the bridge where he ate rabbits, taxidermy, that kind of thing, and wearing their skins like Leatherface, and leaving their remains hanging in the trees. There are plenty of versions of the Bunny Man Bridge legend, all equally eerie, making the one-lane tunnel of Colchester Road such a popular spot that police stake it out every year, chasing off trespassers searching for a scare. The Bunny Man Bridge was featured in the Fox documentary, Scariest Places on Earth, and has been mentioned countless times across the internet.
I never thought that one of the worst days of my life would start out with something as simple as buying shoes, but that's what happened. I still think about how everything would have been so different if I never went into that store. It happened a couple of years ago. I needed new shoes. I figured Foot Locker would be a good place to look, and it was the closest shoe store that I knew of. So I went to the store one afternoon. When I got there, the place was busy, and there were customers all over the place. Not long after I walked into the store, I saw a creepy-looking Foot Locker employee staring at me from a few aisles over. He was this tall, skinny, incel-looking guy. Something about him didn't look right at all, and he instantly made me feel uncomfortable. I tried to ignore him and went over to the shoe section. I looked around at a couple of pairs of shoes, but I didn't see anything that I really liked right away. After a few minutes, I looked up. The same guy was standing right next to me, staring down like a creepy freak.
"Can I help you with anything?"
I declined as kindly as I could, but I was pretty creeped out by the guy. He had just appeared next to me out of nowhere. I hoped that I would leave after that, but then he started awkwardly hitting on me.
"Your feet are really nice. I bet they look great without socks on. You should consider modeling for Nike, or possibly open a Feet Finder account. Maybe an OF for your feet?"
I awkwardly smiled and said thanks. The guy awkwardly walked away after that and went to a corner. I went back to looking at shoes after that, but I could see out of the corner of my eyes that the guy kept staring at me. After a few more awkward minutes of trying to ignore the guy, I finally found a shoe that I really liked. I obviously didn't want to talk to the guy again, so I looked around for another employee to help me, but they were all busy with other customers. I really liked the shoes, so I sucked it up and walked over to the guy. His eyes followed me all the way across the store as I walked towards him.
"Excuse me, could you check to see if you have my size in these shoes?"
The guy stared at me for a few seconds and then said he would get my size from the back. He seemed happy to do it. I waited for a long time, but the guy still didn't come out. He was taking forever. I started to get pretty annoyed. After a few more minutes, I contemplated just leaving and going somewhere else. Then the guy suddenly appeared right next to me.
"Sorry that took so long, but I think you'll find it was worth it."
Okay, thanks.
The guy held out the shoebox and stood there with a weird smile on his face. He looked sweaty, like he had trouble finding my size in the back room. I didn't want to be a prick, so I took the shoebox from him and went to pay. Of course, all the other employees were busy again, so he was the one who checked me out. I didn't make eye contact as the guy rang me up. He was starting to really freak me out. All I wanted to do was get out of there as quickly as possible.
"You know, you've been my favorite customer this week."
I ignored him and just paid for the shoes. As soon as I was finished, I grabbed the shoes and ran out of the store. I was so creeped out, but I was happy to be out of that place. I knew that I was never going back to that Foot Locker ever again. As I walked to my car, something really didn't feel right though, but I figured that it was just the whole experience that I had just had. I was excited to try on my new shoes, so I changed into them before I drove off. They fit great. I had only been driving for a couple of minutes when I started to realize that something felt off. My socks felt wet and sticky. I had no idea what it could be, so I pulled over to see what it was. I took off my shoes as soon as I pulled over, and my socks were definitely wet from something. Then I checked inside the shoes, and that's when I saw that the shoes were filled with a white, clear, sticky substance. It was all over the inside, and they both smelled like piss. I immediately put two and two together and felt sick. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I called the cops and reported what happened, and they arrested the Foot Locker employee shortly after. When they found him, he was busy staring at some other woman from across the store. I was traumatized by the whole thing. I never felt like I could trust another store employee after that, and I haven't been to another Foot Locker since. This story was inspired by a creepy incident regarding a Foot Locker manager who had been accused of releasing bodily fluid into trainer shoes and handing them off to customers to try on before bragging about his sick behavior online. A Bromalia City Centre store manager in Brampton, Ontario allegedly climaxed into shoes before taking them out onto the shop floor. The allegations were made after a series of videos and photos were posted on social media by Darian Kidd of Mississauga. In the clips, he shared images of himself with no clothes on in the store's stockroom. Other clips included footage of him releasing inside a trainer before taking it out to a customer. Foot Locker issued a statement stating, "Foot Locker is committed to operating with the highest ethical standards, and this type of behavior is not tolerated. We are aware of the incident and are taking the appropriate steps to address the situation." In March, I had just one thing on my mind. I wanted to marry my girlfriend. We'd been together for over a year and I was obsessed with her. We were both living with our parents at the time, so instead of struggling to move out independently, we could do it together. I couldn't stop thinking about popping the question all throughout March, so by the time it was about to be April, I just couldn't wait any longer. It just happened to be April Fool's Day when I went over to her place with the intention of asking her to marry me. There was no April Fool's prank, though. I was 100% serious. My girlfriend's parents weren't home that evening, so as usual, when we had the opportunity, we started to make out within a few minutes of me being there. Usually, we'd take it to the bedroom, but that time it just happened right there on the couch. Afterwards, we were cuddling and I was super nervous. She could tell, too. She started giggling because she thought it was because of her, but she didn't know that I was busy in mind trying to work up the courage to pop the big question. Finally, I manned up and did it. "Hey, I wanted to ask you something."
Okay. What is it?
Will you... I'm sorry, I'm just nervous as hell.
Hey, just spit it out. You shouldn't be nervous around me. You weren't nervous 5 minutes ago.
Okay, will you marry me?
I'm sorry, but no.
What?
It's just too early, you know?
No, I don't understand. Wait, this is an April Fool's prank, right? You're joking, right?
No, I'm not joking, okay?
You... How could you do this to me? You bitch! When she said no, I was crushed. I kept trying to get her to admit that she was joking. It had been an April Fool's prank. It had to be. But every time I told her to say she was joking, to admit that she really wanted to say yes, she said no even louder. I couldn't handle it. I stood up, started pacing around and crying. I tried to hold back my tears, but I wanted to show her how she'd hurt me, how she'd ruin our chances of having a life together. Instead of apologizing, she started telling me to calm down, that it wasn't that serious, and that I was out of control. Before I knew it, she was screaming at me to leave, and I was screaming back at her. All my love for her turned to anger because of what she did to me. I'd done everything for her. I was trying to promise my life to her, and she just passed it up. With one word, she proved I meant nothing to her. She had to face the consequences. I had to make her pay. I went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife. Then I came back to the living room and ran at her. The last thing I remember is the look of fear on her face. The next thing I knew, I was covered in blood. The knife was clenched in my hand. I couldn't believe what I had just did. It didn't feel real. I dropped the knife and ran out of the house, leaving her right there on the living room floor for her parents to find. I ran all the way home and hid. The first thing I did was take off all my blood-soaked clothes and get in the shower. But suddenly, my legs were too weak for me to stand. I just sat in the bathtub with the water flowing over me, watching the blood roll down the drain. No matter how much water ran over me, I couldn't get clean. It couldn't wash away what I did. It's not real. I didn't mean to poke her. It was just an April Fool's joke. I'll wake up tomorrow and she'll call me. We'll sort it all out. I didn't mean to. I swear. It was just April Fool's. It was just April Fool's. I was breaking her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. By the end of the day, I was arrested. Her parents must have been devastated when they got home, seeing their daughter like that. I think about it every day. What kind of monster was I in those few seconds? I have nightmares of being her. I can't even scream or breathe. If only she had said yes. It's been a long time since that day, but the memory hasn't faded. Every year on April Fool's Day, I know I'm gonna have that dream. This story was inspired by a horrific April Fool's incident that happened on Saturday, March 30th. A man named Rehan Ahmed allegedly took out his girlfriend, Farida Khatun, for turning down his marriage proposal with a knife. The incident took place at Shalini Ground in Jayanagar, V Block. Reports say that the victim and the accused were in a relationship for more than a year. The victim happened to be a mother of 2 daughters and worked at a spa. The accused worked as a spare car driver. The duo first met in 2022 at a spa and eventually entered into a relationship. After an outing, Rehan proposed to Khatun for marriage. However, she denied his proposal. Rehan assumed that it had to be an April Fool's prank, but things went left when he came to the realization that this was in fact a reality, and that's when Rehan lashed out with a knife and did what he did. A coconut seller nearby saw the victim lying in a pool of her own blood and subsequently called the police. By the time the victim was found, the accused had fled the spot. However, later on, the accused surrendered at the police station. This is downright one of the most disturbing April Fool's incidents to occur in the 21st century. When my husband and I got married, we were both in good shape, but as I got older, my health started to decline. We were only in our 50s, and over the years, I would continually gain weight. I just didn't have the same motivation to go back to the gym and start dieting. This is where the divide between us really started to widen. When we were both overweight and chronically exhausted, neither of us really cared if our intimacy was good or bad. Unfortunately, it only took a few months for my husband to get his six-pack and his libido back, while I was still the same fat, lazy piece of dead weight. I knew he wasn't enjoying himself in bed, as he would keep his eyes closed and avoid touching me with his hands. Eventually, it came to the point that my husband was fed up. He screamed at me one night that I needed to lose weight because he was sick of trying to better himself while stuck with someone who didn't care. I knew in some sense that he was right, but it didn't make me want to change. It just made me feel more resigned to my condition. Without me knowing about it, my husband scheduled me for a doctor's appointment, then drove me there by surprise, like taking a dog to the vet. I was absolutely humiliated, but I went through with it. The doctor told me I was severely obese and that I also had type 2 diabetes. He prescribed me insulin and said I had to drastically change my diet. Believe me, I tried. My husband watched over me like a hawk for the first few weeks, making sure I was adhering to my weight loss diet. Unfortunately, I hated every second of it, and the moment he was gone, I would order fast food, then try to hide the evidence. It didn't take long for my husband to discover that I had been cheating on my diet. He gave me an ultimatum, and that if he caught me cheating on my diet again, he would cheat on me. I didn't believe him. It almost made me want to get caught, to make him realize he was just a spineless liar. I made sure he saw the fast food bags in the trash can the next day, and seemingly just as I thought, for a few weeks, he didn't say or do anything. Then, one night, without a word, he didn't come home. When he returned in the morning, I accused him of cheating. To my surprise, he didn't deny it at all. He gave me the name of the woman and the hotel they stayed in. I was floored, but then it only got worse when instead of apologizing, my husband said he wanted a divorce. On top of that, he told me that he was going on vacation to Thailand without me for a month, and that if I didn't make significant changes by the time he got back, he would go through with the divorce. That news sent me into a panic. I knew I'd be hopelessly alone if he left me, while he could go off and have any woman he wants. Desperate, I went back to the doctor and asked him if there was anything he could give me to help. That's when he recommended Ozempic. I'd heard about it before, how celebrities were taking it and how there were a bunch of bad side effects, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. Not only was my marriage failing, but so was my body. I could feel it. I knew I was going to die early if something didn't change. I was at the end of my rope. That night, I sat with myself by my bedside table, staring at the syringe, trying to get myself to go through with the first dose.
It's just a needle. You're gonna save me, right? You better. God damn it, that hurt! What's going on? What's happening to me? No! No!
Hello, I'm back from my trip. Are you home?
Holy shit! What happened to you? You wanted this. You did this to me. No, I didn't want this. Listen, I think you need to go to the hospital. Something isn't right. Nothing's ever good enough for you, is it? I'm sorry I'm not one of your lady boys. I'm sorry I'm so disgusting and you can't even stand to look at me. Stop it. I'm just worried about your health. Look, I'm sorry I left you for so long, but let me help you with this. You need surgery or something. You need a doctor. You're gonna need a whole hospital when I'm done with you.
This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a woman who said she felt like she was slowly passing away after taking Ozempic. The woman has said, "To people using Ozempic for weight loss, do what you have to do, but it is a diabetes medicine. That's originally what it was used for. I took Ozempic for type 2 diabetes. Both my parents are diabetic and they recommended I talk to my doctor about using it. My doctor prescribed me Ozempic after we discussed my options. It helps to lower your blood sugar levels and honestly it works amazing for that. However, there were side effects. Some of these can be mild, like nausea. Another one is weight loss because it's an appetite suppressant. Later on, I found out that it can cause pain, pancreatitis, and a lot of other nasty side effects. I was okay for the first few doses, but then I started to feel sick each time I took Ozempic. Things just got worse and worse. I felt great for the first few months. My blood sugar was stable and I was losing weight easily. But after about 4 months, I started slowly seeing symptoms. I would feel nauseous, like I had food poisoning. The symptoms would last for days at a time, always after I had taken it. It got to the point where I would spend days throwing up and not able to hold anything in, feeling like I was dying from something that was supposed to help me live. Eventually, I had to admit to myself, although it was helping me a lot with my diabetes, I was also suffering too much with the side effects of taking Ozempic. I had to find another medicine. The woman has since used an alternative and claims that the side effects are still bad, but not as life-threatening.
My wife and I had 3 sons, and they had plenty of cousins, aunts, and uncles to grow up around. Our house was the biggest in the family, so everyone came over whenever we hosted a holiday like Thanksgiving, New Year's, or a birthday party. So when it was Easter Sunday, we invited everyone over for dinner. It was always a good time, but there was one person in the mix that I didn't want to be in the mix. It was my brother. His name was Robert, and he had always been an outcast in the family. He was a weirdo when we were growing up, and it only got worse as the years went by. He dropped out of school and was never capable of being social with people, so he just went from job to job his whole life, never finding his footing in anything. About 5 years ago, his luck finally ran out. He was broken in debt, with no job, no car, and no place to live. Being the caring brother I am, I didn't hesitate to let him stay with us when he asked for help. The only thing Robert seemed to be good at was scaring my kids with his creepy behavior and leeching off me and my wife. For the most part, all he did was sleep in his room all day, watching TV with the door locked and only coming out when he absolutely needed to. I just didn't want my brother to be homeless, but everyone, and I mean everyone, was trying to get me to kick him out. My wife was pissed at both of us. My kids were begging me to get rid of the creepy man sleeping in the room next to them. And even my relatives were baffled by my inaction. The few times that Robert tried to hang out with us, it was unbearably awkward. His interests were all macabre, graphic stuff I didn't want my kids to be exposed to, so I often had to shut down his attempts at conversation. All in all, Robert's life was a shit show. When Easter came around, we were hosting as usual, with me, my wife, our kids, and all the relatives. There were close to 20 people attending the celebration for Easter Sunday. Everything was good for a while. We painted eggs, did the traditional egg hunt, and got everyone to sit in the living room and watch a movie together. For hours, there was no sign of Robert. My wife and her sister started getting dinner ready when they heard a loud thump coming from upstairs. It sounded like Robert had stepped out of his room swinging the door open. That's when he came downstairs and asked for a glass of water. As I began to pour Robert a glass, he leaned down to my son and started talking to him in a low voice. My wife snapped at me to go stop him, so I quickly got between them and sent Robert back upstairs as kindly as I could. The guy then gave me a death stare from hell, and then marched up the stairs like a demented 12-year-old would, except he was in his 40s. About 2 hours later, all the food was ready, and we got all the guests to sit at the table. Everyone was talking excitedly about how good the food was.
Guys, I know we all want to eat, so it's time to say grace, okay?
Really? Now?
We can probably just fix him a plate. Hey, buddy, we didn't forget about you, just thought you wouldn't want to come down. Robert, what are you doing with that? No! No! No!
It was so unreal. I walked among the remains of my family for hours, looking into their paralyzed faces, watching their blood pool together and seep through the floorboards, smelling their final emissions, like the breath of death itself was on my cheek. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was a monstrous thing to do, yet some people go their whole lives without accomplishing anything. I knew half the people I took out were just like that, unimportant, unmemorable, doomed to be forgotten by history. I was going to be one of them too, but I changed that. It's not that I enjoyed it. It wasn't like scratching an itch. It was more like flipping that light switch off and on 3 times just so you can stop thinking about it. I only felt hollow relief, but I couldn't go for another second without it. Still, I wasn't going to be a coward and try to avoid the consequences of my actions.
You've reached emergency services. Please.
Listen to me. I am at 635 Minor Avenue. My family was having their Easter dinner, and I did something bad. Something very, very bad.
Sir, what did you do? Sir? Sir? Hello, sir?
I walked outside and waited for the police on the porch. I wanted to get one last breath of free air before they put me away forever. It took the police 10 precious minutes to arrive, and since then, I've never seen the outside world. This story was inspired by a horrific incident that occurred on Easter Sunday. A 41-year-old man named James Rupert took out 11 members of his own family in his mother's house in Ohio. Rupert was found guilty and received 2 life sentences to be served consecutively. He was moved to Franklin Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio in 2019 because of his declining health. James eventually passed away from natural causes on June 4th of 2022 while incarcerated at the Franklin Medical Center. Rupert was 88 at the time. The night before the murders, James went out as he did nearly every night. At a cocktail lounge, he talked with an employee saying he was frustrated with his mother's demands on him and his impending eviction, and that he quote-unquote needed to solve the problem. According to Bishop, Rupert stated that his mother had complained that if he could afford to buy beer 7 nights a week, he could afford to pay the rent.
I'll never forget my friend's April Fool's prank. Kyle was always a clown. I was going to college to become an engineer, and he was in almost all of my classes. I worked and studied diligently, but Kyle never took anything seriously. He constantly distracted himself and me from getting anything ever done. Kyle would also try to convince me to skip class every day, but I never let him be that much of a bad influence on me. I encouraged him to have good attendance, because tuition was expensive as hell, and engineering is one of those majors when you can't miss class, or else you'll be screwed. Unfortunately, despite all my efforts, he didn't show up to 90% of our classes. One day, I snuck in some text to see where he was at, but I never got any reply, even after the lecture was over. I managed to record the whole thing on my phone to help him catch up whenever I saw him next, but I didn't know when that would be. We weren't roommates, so I didn't see him after school either. I chalked it up to Kyle sleeping in or just flat out ignoring my calls and messages, so I wasn't worried about it and went on with my business. I got through my studying for the evening, then I played a few rounds of card, then eventually went to bed. Then, in the middle of the night, I woke up to Kyle FaceTiming me. I rolled over to look at my phone, but after thinking about it for a second, I didn't answer. I was extremely tired and had class in the morning, so having him yapping in my ear about something unimportant was the last thing I needed. So, I set my phone away and ignored it. Not even a minute later, the ringing started back up again. My phone was on vibrate, but the reverberation through my nightstand was super loud, so it was annoying as hell. I kept hanging up, but Kyle would call me back to back 3 or 4 more times. I was about to give in and answer if he had called for a 5th time, but he didn't. Relieved, I quickly fell back asleep. About 2 hours later, around 4 in the morning, I woke up again to Kyle calling me. I was finally fed up, and I saw he had called me 10 times before I noticed. I answered, fully ready to tell him off, but then I saw his face, and I realized he had been serious the entire time. Kyle was in a dark room, and his face was distraught, like he'd been crying for hours. His face was bright red and pouring sweat. Worst of all, there was a noose around his neck. I got up from my bed and started talking at full volume, completely disregarding my roommates, saying,
Kyle, what the hell is happening? Where are you?
I don't know. They just took me and said they're gonna kick the stool from under me if I try to escape.
The stool? Shit! Oh God, please tell me you're joking!
You have to come find me. Please, I'm begging you. Save me.
No! Kyle! Oh shit! I'm gonna call the cops! Kyle!
April Fools!
You sick piece of shit! Screw you! I was so unbelievably pissed at Kyle. He played practical jokes on me before, but nothing to that intensity. He'd only tricked me for maybe 30 seconds, but I was honestly traumatized. There was no chance of me going back to sleep after that.
so I just left my bedroom and made coffee. I had to explain to my roommates why I woke them up screaming, and they offered to help me get back at him since we still had all of the April Fool's Day ahead of us. But I honestly wasn't in the mood for more jokes. Our class was at 8 a.m., so I had plans to get at him when I saw him. I couldn't believe he was willing to miss an entire day of class just weeks before finals, all for some idiotic prank that I would literally lose sleep over. Unfortunately, he was a no-show again. This made me even more mad, as I figured he was avoiding his just punishment. But then, later that day, I was pulled into the dean's office by a couple of cops and got hit with the most devastating news of my life. Kyle's April Fool's prank had gone horribly wrong and turned deadly. He was found by his roommates in the morning with the stool he'd been standing on tipped over and his phone on the ground. I was the last person he called, so they questioned me if I knew anything about the incident. I told them about the prank he pulled on me, which is why I didn't call for help. Unfortunately, because I hung up on him, I had no idea what happened just seconds after I got off the phone. Ever since then, I've felt this immense weight of guilt hanging over me. If I had just stayed on the phone, I could have called his roommates or rushed over there myself and saved him. Instead, I did nothing, and now he's gone. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding an April Fool's prank turned deadly after a male played with a rope during a video call to a friend and accidentally slipped. This prank ultimately cost him his life. The incident occurred at the victim's residence on Monday. He was identified as Abhishek Raghuvanshi. April the 1st is celebrated as April Fool's Day, with people playing tricks on their friends, family, and colleagues. But in Abhishek's case, it was his last day. The postmortem of the male has since been conducted.
I had been working at Foot Locker for a while when it happened. I always worked the closing shift at night. I would see and greet customers and assist them whenever they needed. I also had to prevent shoplifters and keep an eye out for sketchy people. It wasn't a bad gig for a retail job. The pay was decent, and the job wasn't very hard. The place was honestly pretty slow, so it was usually just me and a female coworker that worked nights. I really didn't have any complaints at all. That is, until one night. I was working the closing shift again with my female coworker, and it was getting late. It had been an easy day, and there were only a couple of customers still browsing around. Then I saw this creepy, incel-looking guy walk into the store. The guy was in his 20s and reeked of pot. Something about him just made him seem sketchy and up to no good.
Ooh, look at those LeBron 19s. Man, I can't wait to dip my feet inside those. I wonder if these smell like him.
I had a bad feeling as soon as I saw him. I watched him for a few minutes. The guy looked around everywhere, but he didn't buy anything. I asked the guy if he needed any help, but he refused. He really didn't seem like he wanted me around. He still looked sketchy to me, so I kept my eye on the guy. He looked around for a few more minutes, and then he left. I figured the guy must have been stoned off his ass and didn't know what he was doing, so I put him out of my mind and just got back to work. The strange thing was that the same thing continued to happen every other week. The same guy would show up later in the night and walk around the store for a while. He never bought anything. He just looked around and then left. It was really weird. Every time I saw him, I was reminded of how creepy he looked. But he never really did anything that justified that thought. I just assumed he was window shopping as usual. One night, I was working with the same female coworker and the store wasn't busy at all. We were pretty late into our shift, and I was looking forward to going home. Then I saw the same creepy guy walk in. I decided that I was really going to keep an eye on him that night. I didn't want to judge, but something about this guy just didn't sit right with me. I watched him from a distance as he looked around. I didn't know if it was possible, but the guy looked even creepier that night. His eyes were sunken in, and his face was gaunt and expressionless. He still reeked of pot too. He went back and forth between the different aisles, not really stopping to look at anything for too long. The guy eventually wandered into the clothing aisle and started looking through the racks. It seemed like he was trying to hide from the staff. I didn't want to look like a stalker or harass customers, but I decided that I'd better check in that instance. I walked around to get a better view of the aisle, and that's when I saw the guy stuffing clothes into his pants.
Hey, stop right there!
I ran at the guy and told him that I was calling the cops for him stealing. The guy froze for a second, and then he tried to make a run for it. I then grabbed the guy's arm and tried to hold him, but he wouldn't stop trying to break free.
Help! Somebody help me stop this guy! He's a thief!
I kept screaming, but the only other person was my female coworker. She ran to call security while the guy and I fought each other. The guy was not about to give up, and he and I went at it. All I was trying to do was hold him until the cops arrived, but he was way stronger than he looked. He threw me up against the clothes rack and started sprinting for the door. Just as he was about to leave, I lunged at him and grabbed his legs. I then pulled him to the floor, and we wrestled around.
You're not getting away with this, you dipshit!
The guy kept fighting me like an animal, and I didn't know how much longer I was going to be able to hold him. He was a complete lunatic. We rolled around on the floor, wrestling back and forth. Then finally, he stopped fighting me and let me pin him down. I was exhausted, and I couldn't believe that I had won. Now all I had to do was hold him there until the cops could take him away. I sat on top of the guy, panting out of breath. Then out of nowhere, the guy pulled out a knife and stabbed me in the neck. He then pushed me off of him and ran out of the store. I panicked and flailed about on the floor as I felt the blood flowing from my neck. I thought I was going to die. I lay there on the floor, not moving. I felt like I was going to black out at any second, but I watched as the staff from the other stores came running out to apprehend the guy. They somehow managed to grab him and get the knife away before he hurt anyone else. Security arrived a few seconds later and arrested the guy. I've been traumatized by that night ever since. It was some time before I was able to go back to work, and even then, I felt nervous every time I saw a new customer. Some nights I could have sworn that I actually saw the guy again, and each of those times, I could feel his cold blade piercing into my neck. This story was inspired by a horrific Foot Locker incident regarding a young man working at one of Winnipeg's busiest shopping centers who was pierced in the neck while trying to stop a shoplifter on Thursday evening, witnesses say. The employee was working at the Foot Locker store on the second floor of Polo Park Mall when he confronted a male trying to steal several articles of clothing. Melvina Guibauchet and her husband, Dakota Guibauchet, were paying for purchases at the store when they heard an employee yelling that someone had been caught shoplifting. They say the situation was calm at first, with employees blocking each of the store's 2 exits while they waited for security to arrive. But Dakota said that all changed when the alleged shoplifter pulled out a knife and tried to make a break for it. He says he saw the suspect hit the victim in the neck with the weapon as he tried to get out of the store. The couple says employees were able to disarm the attacker and hold him until security arrived. Police say they were called around 8:30 p.m. to the mall and arrested the suspect. The victim was taken to the hospital in unstable condition, but has since been upgraded to stable. The suspect was charged with robbery and the attack.
I work for a commercial cleaning agency. I'm usually contracted to work overnight, and my last contract was no exception. I was to work alone for a week, deep cleaning a giant 5-story storage warehouse for a company that manufactured toys. On the surface, the job was like any other. Organize boxes, dust the shelves, sweep and mop the floors of each floor, clean out the trash bins, that kind of stuff. However, something immediately stuck out to me on my first night. Prior to showing up, I thought when my employer said this company makes toys for kids, I was thinking of kid-sized toys. But then I saw giant 20-foot-tall monstrosities lying around the warehouse. They weren't staged like they were mascots or anything, and they didn't have any labels telling me what they were called or where they were supposed to go. The first one I saw was this humongous blue-haired Elmo wannabe with creepy red lips. He was sitting up against a wall the first night, so I called the next day to ask what I should do with him. They told me that I could just clean around them, or if they were really in the way, I could sit them inside a closet. The only real information they gave me was that the thing's name was Huggy Wuggy. The next night, I was sweeping the aisle at the far end of one section where Huggy Wuggy was at. When I got to the end of the aisle and turned the corner, I heard a crash. I looked back to see if anyone was there, but there was no one, just that creepy-ass doll. I called in to see if anyone else happened to be working in the warehouse that night, but there wasn't supposed to be. Out of fear, I dragged the Huggy Wuggy thing to the closet janitor's closet and stuffed him inside. I didn't bother to take him out when I left. I just focused on finishing my shift. The next night, more unusual activity was happening. I remember hearing this deep, distorted voice echoing across the warehouse. I walked over to where I heard it, and that's when I found someone standing outside the door to the closet that I had stuffed Huggy Wuggy into. I wasn't too sure if it was a person. I was far away, but this guy looked like he was 8 feet tall. I shouted to them, but as soon as I spoke, that thing ran away. I started shitting bricks. I called my boss again, but he just brushed the notion down to me being paranoid and that everything was normal. I was getting concerned about everything that was happening, but just manned up, as the contract was only for a week. However, the night after was when things took a very dark turn. As I was cleaning, I kept hearing what sounded like a little girl in the distance. I was freaking out and started searching around the warehouse for the source of the sound, but instead I found another one of those things. It looked just like Huggy Wuggy, but it was pink. I went into a rage and stuffed that thing into another closet and locked the door. I was sick and tired of those weird monstrosities getting in my way with no explanation as to what they were there. I just wanted to get my job done and leave. But these things weren't done with me yet. Stupid Huggy Wuggy Elmo looking bullshit. I might as well go back to my security job at this rate. Alright, that's it for tonight. Let me go! Oh, stop it! Somebody help me! I saw into that thing's endless stomach, and I was sure I was about to be consumed. Nothing I did seemed to affect it at all, but then I remembered I had a dirty mop in my hands, so I crammed that disgusting thing down its throat. I was able to break free, myself, and ran for the nearest exit, but I realized I was going to have an early demise when I saw that thing staring at me from a distance with its creepy-ass eyes and smile. That's when I knew I couldn't escape, and that it was about to be all over for me. This story was inspired by a Huggy Wuggy incident reported online about the horror video game character. A mother recently told the British outlet Sky News that her relative had attempted to jump out of a window after seeing an older relative play the Huggy Wuggy game on the gaming platform Roblox. Now, we're not sure if these claims are legitimate or not, but we can only go off what we saw online. Nevertheless, parents are going through plush animal hell over the Huggy Wuggy character. With a blue and red mouth, the shaggy monster shows off razor-sharp teeth when he smiles in the game Poppy Playtime. Players solve puzzles to find the maniacal mascot, who then pops out of vents and chases them around. Poppy Playtime is set in an abandoned toy factory, which also inspired the story. Since then, such claims have circulated among schools, mom Facebook groups, and police departments all over the world, followed by claims that players are replicating the actions of Huggy Wuggy by hugging others extremely tightly and whispering the gruesome lyrics to each other.
This happened around Easter, which still traumatizes me till this day. I used to do community work at this old church a few years ago. It was more than just a place of worship. It was my home. I grew up in a very religious family where Sunday Mass was non-negotiable. Holidays were all-day affairs, and praying was an everyday thing. I knew everyone in the church, from the nuns to the choirs, the priest Father Michael, and a lot of regulars that came to pray. We were basically a tight-knit community, which I would consider my family to some degree. Then, things began to change. One of the nuns who we'll call Sister Agnes started to look off, like more gaunt and pale than usual.
Sister Agnes?
Yes.
Is everything okay?
Yes. Everything is just fine. No problems at all. What a lovely day it is, right?
Yeah, it is a lovely day.
The week leading up to Easter was a whirlwind. We were all working overtime, getting the church ready for the big day. I was helping clean the restrooms, and Sister Agnes was looking particularly frail. The priest Father Michael was with her, so I didn't worry too much as he was looking after her. That was how it was for the next few days, and before I knew it, it was Easter Sunday. However, it wasn't at all what I expected. What was supposed to be a big celebration became a nightmare. When I made my way to the church for the Mass, I saw nothing but police cars everywhere. The church was cordoned off. No Mass, just the cops and that awful sinking feeling in my stomach. Then, the news broke. Sister Agnes had been taken out. She was allegedly punctured about 30 times, with an inverted cross carved into her chest. At first, I couldn't believe it. It was something out of a horror movie. Far from the peaceful church I had always adored, I broke down, sobbing and shaking. How could this happen? Who could do something so evil? The whole neighborhood was in shock. Everyone was whispering about how it could have been a cult or something that did this to her. But over time, there were no leads or suspects. It became a cold case, and everyone just went back to living their normal lives. But I was still terrified. I couldn't even walk past the church without getting nervous. So, I started going to a different church just to feel safe. It took me 3 years before I could even think about going back there. But eventually, I did. But it wasn't the same. Something about the whole situation just didn't sit right with me. During one night after Mass, I stayed to catch up with Father Michael. I waited for him to complete his churchly obligations, and when everyone else had left the church, it was just me and Father Michael. We started catching up, recalling the good old days, stuff like that. I know that it should have been comforting for me, but for reasons I couldn't explain, something was off. What happened next caught me off guard. One moment, we were sitting down and socializing, and the next, he suddenly lunged at me, bear hugging me like a wild animal, while cackling like a lunatic. I kicked and screamed as hard as I could, hoping someone could hear me and come to my aid. Shut up! Shut up! Shut the hell up or you're gonna end up like her! I couldn't believe what I was hearing or what was happening. All I could do was fight back like a cornered animal. But I couldn't do much as he was much stronger than me. He pinned me to the ground and held me there. All I could do was kick and scream and try to fight the freak off. I was basically in survival mode. After several minutes, I managed to break free, getting away from him. I ran like my life depended on it. He was chasing after me, pleading for me to stop like a lunatic. I felt like a trapped animal waiting to be slaughtered. I ran for the front door of the church, not knowing the caretaker already had it locked. But before Father Michael could catch up to me, I ran to the side hallway and was able to find an exit. I got the hell out of there and ran until I arrived home. I locked all the doors and windows, sobbing and shaking. I called the police, telling them everything that had happened. When they arrived at the church, they immediately arrested him and brought him to jail. And that's when the horrible truth came out. The news reports and police investigations pushed the authorities to reopen the case of Sister Agnes. It was later found out that Father Michael had been hearing voices in his head, and that they were allegedly too impossible for him to ignore, causing him to act in a rage and take her out in a twisted, ritualistic way. He took a knife and did what he did 30 times. When authorities asked him why he pierced an inverted cross on her, he said he did it because he wanted to make it seem as if there was a satanic ritual that took place, so that there was no heat on him. But all along, it was him. He'd been hiding in plain sight, Poor Sister Agnes, she didn't stand a chance. This story was inspired by a horrific Easter incident that happened on Holy Saturday in Ohio and involved a nun and a priest. In April 1980, Sister Margaret Ann Paul was found in the chapel of Toledo Mercy Hospital. She had been pierced by a sharp object over 30 times, including 9 wounds in the form of an inverted cross, and covered with an altar cloth. The scene was made to look like a satanic ritual that had taken place. It took 2 decades for the slaying to be solved, in which time the case went cold, and was only reopened after a woman accused a priest of ritual intimate torment. That priest/culprit was Father Gerald Robinson, the same priest who had conducted Margaret's funeral service. He was finally arrested in 2006 and sentenced to life in prison, where he later passed in 2014.
This story happened around April Fools. My family runs an aircraft service and repair business that my dad started years ago. My mom does the numbers, and I'm learning to replace my dad as CEO when he retires. It started out as a small-scale venture, but now we own and operate out of a hangar at our city's biggest airport. Through my family's hard work, we've become quite successful and wealthy. I plan to keep that success up when my father leaves, so I've spent my adult work life learning how to run the company. I would often spend late nights at the cubicle area at the hangar, buried in paperwork and emails. I was basically the only person working in the building, so you can imagine how creepy it was being there just by myself, working in such a large building. I would hear noises every so often, but I just brushed it off as possibly some rats lurking around the building. I eventually got used to it though. However, on this one night, everything changed. On the night of April Fools, I was working late at my cubicle, typing away on the computer. I would bounce around from the office to the hangar every so now and then due to my line of work. I remember texting my dad, giving him an update that I'd be home soon. After sending the text, I left the hangar and started walking to the parking lot just outside the airport. The parking lot is usually sparsely populated at that hour, but as I walked toward my car, I noticed a van parked next to it. Given how empty the area was, I wouldn't expect to have anyone parked next to me. They were also parked rudely close to my driver's side door, so I knew it would be a crunch getting into my car. I disregarded it and squeezed between the two vehicles, then opened my door and started to slide in through the small gap. That's when I heard something loud from right behind me, the van's side door sliding open.
Help! Somebody help!
In the blink of an eye, my life changed. One moment I was on the way home to my parents, and the next I'm in the back of a stranger's van being held at knife point by masked kidnappers who are screaming in my face. I quickly realized I wasn't getting out of this situation by overpowering anyone, so I tried to go along with them the best I could, hoping that somehow if I complied, I would get home safely. Is this an April Fool's prank? Please tell me it is!
Shut up and run your pockets! Give us everything you own before I start cutting off your fingers!
Fine, here, take it! My ID? But there's like $200 in there. Why don't you take that?
This address! Do you still live with your parents?
No, please don't hurt them. I'm begging you.
Quiet! Now listen to me, you whiny little shit! I don't care about your fat asshole of a dad or the used up old hag you call your mother! All I want is their money, and you're gonna help me get it from them. Understand?
Okay. I'll do anything you want.
Good. Now tell us where your mommy and daddy live so we can go on a little ride.
I stayed up waiting for my son to come home for hours. He texted me at 1:30 saying he was on his way. Without traffic, it should have taken him 30 minutes to get home, but 3 a.m. came and went, and then 4 a.m. Then, before I knew it, I was sitting in the living room at 5 in the morning with no sign of my son. No calls, no texts, nothing. Then, I finally heard the doorbell ring. God damn it, that better be him. What the... Robert? What the hell's going on? No. No! Ah! I called the cops immediately as soon as I read the ransom note. I told them I was willing to do anything to get my son back. We did everything the note told us to do. We got the money together, we said we were ready to send it, but then we heard nothing. Weeks went by and nothing happened. Our last resort was to offer a reward to the public for anyone who could help us, but nobody has given us anything useful. It's been so long since I've seen my son. I just want him back. I just want him to come home. Every day, I wish this was all just one big April Fool's prank, but as every passing day goes by, I'm faced with the grim reality that this was real. Ah! This story was inspired by a disturbing incident that happened on April Fool's Day. 2 days after their 26-year-old son was kidnapped in Lakeland, Thomas and Pamela Wiles received a ransom note. They followed the instructions to get their son back, but something went wrong. On Friday, 3 weeks after the April 1st abduction of Robert Arthur Wiles, his parents had no word of his whereabouts and do not know whether the kidnappers received their response. They and the FBI appealed to the public for help and to the kidnappers to contact the Wiles family again. The kidnapped son's name was Robert Wiles, who was a business development manager for National Flight Services. Robert's mom told reporters, "We are worried about Robert. We love Robert, and we are terribly concerned about his safety. We want him to know that his family loves him. We care about him, and we want him to come home. If anyone knows where he is, we need to speak with Robert. We'll do anything we can to get our son back and bring him home safe. Our son knows how to reach us. He has our number. And the only thing that matters to us is for our son to come home safely." The family offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to their son's safe return. FBI agents have since searched the areas in Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Thailand, as well as Lakeland and the greater Orlando and Sarasota areas, but Robert's whereabouts remain unknown.
I lived with my fiance and soon-to-be husband. My mother also lived with us. She was always a bit self-conscious with herself, but after I got engaged, she went into overdrive. Suddenly, it wasn't just about looking good in photos. She was desperate for a big transformation. That's when my mom went to the doctors and got prescribed a medication called Ozempic. She told me she was going to use it to treat her diabetes, but I knew what her true intentions were. After weeks of using it, her weight loss was pretty alarming. It was like she was melting, not losing weight. Her clothes had become too large for her to wear, and her skin was now papery and rough. What was even more disturbing were her eyes. They used to be so loving and full of life, but now it was like she was staring out from a skull. Then, the personality changes started. They were little things at first, but then things escalated quickly to her becoming a cold bitch. She became obsessed not only with her weight, but with control. She was a totally different person.
Give me more Ozempic! Give me more Ozempic!
Mom, my wedding is in a couple of weeks.
I don't give a shit about your wedding! I just give a shit about fitting into my dress properly!
Every night, I could hear her rearranging the furniture downstairs. I could also hear her talking, like she was talking to herself. It was apparent she had lost her mind. The woman had gone completely psycho. One time, I caught her standing in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator in the middle of the night, mumbling to herself. I began avoiding my mom altogether, and just talked to her when it was about important stuff like my wedding. But those conversations never went anywhere, and this happened all because of a substance called Ozempic. The doctor reminded her many times to use the prescribed dosage, but my mom wouldn't listen because she thought she knew better. She ignored the doctor's instructions, increasing the dosage. I never found out how much she really took, but one time, when I tried to stop her from taking any more Ozempic, She snapped and threatened to kill me. Over time, she became a paranoid, evil, and self-centered old woman. She was convinced that everyone was judging her. I just agreed with her most of the time and just avoided any arguments. My husband would sometimes also try to talk some sense into her, but she would just make death threats at him too. It got to the point where we just minded our own business and avoided her as much as we could. But I didn't want to give up on her just yet. I thought that if we simply got rid of the Ozempic entirely, then maybe she would go back to normal. One night, she stepped out of the house, leaving me home alone. That's when I took the opportunity to throw away all the Ozempic. I went through all her drawers, cabinets, and anywhere I thought she would stash it. I threw it all out in the trash and then crawled back into bed. Not long after, my mom arrived home. All I remember next was the sounds of plates shattering on the floor, followed by psychotic screaming sounds. Then I got up to see what was happening. I slowly crept down the stairs, hoping she wasn't going to snap at me. That's when I eventually saw my mom standing in the dark kitchen like a freak. That's when she charged at me and began trying to strangle me.
Where's my Ozempic, you dirty little bitch?
I don't know! You probably used all of it already! Get off of me!
She kept asking me where it was, telling me how much she needed it. All I could think of was how to get her off of me. Luckily, my fiance got home from work and managed to pull her off of me. After that, I was more than terrified. I was traumatized, but the wedding was so close, and I was desperate to believe that it was just a phase, and that she'd wake up and be herself again. My fiance and I went up to our bedroom and avoided her for the rest of the night. I didn't want to call the cops on my own mother. I just knew my husband and I would eventually move out away from her. So, I decided to take the high road and be cordial for the time being. The next morning, my husband and I went to use the washroom together, and then to the kitchen together. We didn't want to be alone in a room with her, especially with what happened last night. When we got into the kitchen, we saw the most disturbing thing ever. We saw my mom lying on the kitchen floor. And what creeped me the hell out was that she was still smiling in a twisted, psychotic way. I knew that image would haunt me forever. Fast forward to my wedding. It was more like a funeral. While I was walking down the aisle towards my husband and the priest, all I could see was her casket, and then her sitting up from it, smiling at me saying,
Give me more Ozempic!
This story was inspired by a disturbing incident regarding an Australian mom who wanted to slim down in time for her daughter's wedding by taking Ozempic, known for inducing dramatic weight loss, but had sadly passed away. The victim was a 56-year-old woman named Trish Webster who started taking Ozempic after struggling to lose weight through the traditional means, her husband Roy Webster would say. The 56-year-old who did not have diabetes saw a TV ad for Ozempic and obtained a prescription from her doctor in 2022 after learning that significant weight loss was one of the drug's side effects. Her daughter was getting married and she just kept mentioning that dress that she wanted to wear, so she went into drastic measures, her husband said. He also stated Trish lost 35 pounds in 5 months, but also experienced severe nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. The situation took a turn for the worst when Roy noticed brown stuff coming out of Trish's mouth. I realized she wasn't breathing and started doing CPR, he remembered. Unfortunately, his efforts were to no avail.
My dad hasn't been around growing up, and since I'm the oldest, I help my mother take care of my younger brother. I literally try to be the dad that he never had, so I buy him stuff here and there. My brother was one of those fashion freaks, especially when it comes to shoes. He always wanted the new Nikes, Yeezys, LeBrons, Jordans, and whatever came out. But a while ago, he was hyped up about the release of these new line of retro Jordans. Apparently, all the kids at his school were raving about it, and so I figured I'd treat him since his current shoes were getting worn out. I then took him to the Foot Locker on the Saturday the shoes were released, expecting it to be a quick purchase. But then I saw the massive line of people outside the building. It seemed like a lot of people really wanted these shoes. We got out of the car and into the back of the longest line I've ever forced myself to stand through. It was completely ridiculous. All those people standing outside in the cold, doing nothing, just waiting to blow $200 on a pair of sneakers. That line was testing every ounce of my patience though. It crawled along like it wasn't even moving at all. People got angry that we weren't making visible progress and started pushing and shoving and crowding us together. I was just about to lose it when we finally got led into the store. My little brother went up and asked for the new retro Jordans, and then the cashier said that we were getting the last pair. My brother's face lit up like Christmas. He didn't care that they were 2 sizes too big for him. He'd find a way to grow into them. I was happy for him, and taking out my wallet when all of a sudden, this bald, middle-aged asshole butted in line behind us and said he was in line first. He started shouting at my little brother and accused him of cutting in line, and he even grabbed onto the box and tried to rip it out of his hands. I immediately stepped in, but I had no clue what I was walking into.
Give me those, you little rat!
Stop it! I got them first!
Bitch, these are too small for you! Go shop at Baby Gap!
Hey! Leave him alone! You're a grown-ass man. What are you doing yelling at a kid? If you got a problem with him, talk to me.
How about I knock you out in front of this little shit? Then I'll take the shoes. It's mine. I've been waiting in line for 5 hours. Back off. I didn't wait in line for nothing.
Hey, he said those are the last ones. Get him!
The man then threw a punch, but within seconds, the whole store was in chaos. Everyone found out there were no more shoes left and started beating the shit out of each other trying to get to them. I lost my brother in the crowd while I was fighting to get that guy off of me. For a second, I thought I was getting the upper hand, but then he reached behind his back, and the next thing I knew, I was staring down a cold barrel. I put up my hands and stepped away. Then I turned and ran out of the store. I ducked behind the first car I saw for cover. Then I heard the sounds, confirming that psycho wouldn't have hesitated to blow my brains out. When it stopped, the first thing I thought of was that my brother wasn't with me. I looked all around the parking lot, but I couldn't see him. People were pouring out of the store, screaming for help, but none of them were my brother. I started running back, knowing I was walking into a death trap. I didn't care. I couldn't let my little brother get hurt. I was just feet away from the door, but then somebody outside grabbed me. They stopped me from going in, yelling in my face that it wasn't safe. I tried to fight him off, but other people helped him hold me back, no matter how hard I tried. Then, I saw the last person leave the store. It was the man that had threatened me. He ran out with the last box of sneakers in one hand, and the same pistol in the other. I wanted to run after him, but I was stopped from doing that too. It wasn't until he was gone that they let me go, and I could finally go into the store to find my brother. The entire place had been trashed, and there were 2 people lying on the floor, bloodied and not moving. One of them was my brother. I ran to him and did everything I could to help him, but I was a panicking, screaming wreck. Soon, the ambulance came to take him away, and they said I was too erratic to ride with him. For those 10 minutes I was driving myself to the hospital, not knowing if he would live. I almost couldn't keep it together enough to not drive off the road. Thankfully, I'm happy to say that he made it. So did the other person who was injured. However, that's where the good fortune ended. Despite cops combing through the store and watching the security footage, that violent thief is still on the run. I still run this day back in my head all the time, thinking about what I could have done to better protect my brother, and what I might do if I ever see that man again. I hope for everyone's sake that never happens, which is just one reason why I'll never go to Foot Locker again. This story was inspired by a disturbing incident regarding a fight over a pair of new Nike Jordan 2 Retro Winged shoes, which ended with the slaying at the suburban Minneapolis Foot Locker, wounding 2 people during the Saturday morning sale. The shoes, which was worth about $200, went on sale Saturday, sparking multiple disturbances throughout Minneapolis and Madison, as people hoping to score a pair of Michael Jordan's new line of sneakers found there wasn't enough to go around. A scuffle then broke out among a crowd of 60 customers after learning the store had only 10 pairs left. Cops were already at the strip mall when a melee inside the store spilled out into the parking lot, a witness said. It was absolutely crazy. I heard police screaming, "Get down, get down." Shoppers darted for cover as witnesses outside Foot Locker heard loud bangs ring out. 2 victims were injured, but are expected to survive, authorities said. As for the suspects, It has been unknown whether they have been caught or even identified. I was playing Poppy Playtime when I discovered there was a separate multiplayer mode called Project Playtime. 6 players are on a team trying to build a giant toy, so they can escape while the 7th player plays as a monster trying to kill them. It was pretty fun, but it felt like barely anyone played it by the time I knew about it, as the servers were super dead. I ended up having to play on a European server, even though I live in America, and the guy playing the monster was from somewhere in Asia. The guy's username was Kang. I couldn't tell if he was going to be some gaming master or if his ping was going to hold him back, but the game turned out to be pretty intense. Not everyone was able to escape. Everyone but me got killed by Kang, but at the last second, I managed to pull off a win, so I rubbed it in Kang's face, especially because he had been talking a bunch of shit before the game started. I more than succeeded in getting under his skin, because he started messaging me on Steam in all caps, saying I was a trash player and a horrible person, but I just replied with a smug, "I beat you." Kang got even more pissed off and started threatening to beat me to death in real life, and that's about when I blocked him. I didn't think for a second that anything was going to come of it. This was far from the first time I'd gotten death threats online, and I always just blocked them. I even find it funny to think about their reaction on the other side when they realize I blocked them. Just keyboard warriors screaming and crying their heads off because they lost in a video game. I like to think there are no keys left on the right side of their keyboard, and their monitor is covered in layers of spit. Then their mom comes in and tells them to shut the hell up and get a job. King was different though. A few minutes later, I got a message from a random Steam account. It was a brand new account with no profile picture or games in their library, and the message was just a string of numbers. After a moment, I realized it was an IP address, though I wasn't sure what mine was, so I couldn't tell if it was actually mine. But then the second account sent my full street address too. This was coming right off the interaction with Kang, so I knew it was him. I blocked and reported the new account. Then I went back and reported his original account as well. I was sure he was just trying to scare me, as I knew he lived on the other side of the world. Finding out where I lived was one thing, but paying hundreds of dollars for a plane ticket was ridiculous. A few days went by, and I eventually forgot about it. I got pretty into Poppy Playtime, though I put together my own friends on Steam, so I didn't have to risk getting in a lobby with Kang again. One night, my friends and I played until about 2 in the morning, then I crashed in bed and fell asleep. A while later, after maybe an hour, I woke up because I had to use the bathroom, and when I opened my eyes, I saw the silhouette of a person standing over me. At first, I thought I was just imagining it, but after I came out of my drowsiness, I realized there really was a person in my room. I screamed and jumped back, but I was cornered.
Who the hell are you? You don't recognize me? No, I've never seen you in my life. Now get the hell out of my house before I call the cops. Dad! Hey, stay away from me! You beat me in Poppy Playtime. Now it's my turn to beat you.
Kang smashed the hammer into my head dozens of times, but I only remembered the first few impacts. My stepdad said he came into my room after hearing the yelling, and flipped the light to only see Kang attacking me. The psycho then fled through the window, but by then I was unconscious. I woke up in the hospital a day later, doped up on morphine and still feeling the pounding pain in my head. Somehow, despite tearing through my skin and breaking my skull, Kang didn't manage to do any permanent damage to my brain. The police tracked him down and arrested him a few days later while he was trying to board a plane back to Asia. He's being charged for attempted murder. I've never encountered someone that would actually turn their rage over a video game into real-life violence on another person, especially holding on to that anger for multiple days while traveling thousands of miles across the planet is absolutely disturbing. I've changed my perspective on gamer rage. When I used to find it funny and embarrassing, but now it just makes me think of what happened to me because of it. I suffered a severe concussion, but it could have been 1,000 times worse. This story was inspired by a horrific online gaming incident. Although it wasn't solely based on Poppy playtime, we decided to include it in the video, as many online gaming incidences can similarly turn deadly. The incident in the video was inspired by an online gamer from New Jersey who recently flew to Florida, broke into the home of a fellow player with whom he had feuded with digitally, but never met in person, and tried to beat him to death with a hammer. According to authorities, it was revealed to be a 20-year-old male named Edward Kang. He became an extreme example case of a phenomenon that academics call internet banging, which involves online arguments, often between young people, that escalates into physical violence. It was alleged that Kang and the victim became familiar with each other, playing an online role-playing game called CORE.AG. The Korean game is supposed to be no longer available beginning on Thursday, as its publisher announced in April, citing a decline in number of active players. But prior to the cancellation, Kang and the other player became locked in some sort of online altercation. Kang then informed his family that he was headed out of town to meet a friend he had made through gaming. The sheriff said Kang flew from Newark, New Jersey to Jacksonville, Florida, and booked himself into a hotel near his fellow gamer's home early on Friday morning. He had allegedly bought a hammer and a flashlight at a local hardware store, receipts for which deputies later found in Kang's hotel room. By early Sunday, Kang purportedly had put on black clothes, gloves, and a mask, and went into his target's home through an unlocked door. He waited for the victim to get up and take a bathroom break from gaming, and then he battered him with the hammer. The alleged victim managed to wrestle Kang to the ground while screaming for help. The victim's stepfather woke up after hearing the screams, rushed to his stepson's side, helped take Kang's hammer away, and restrained him until deputies were called, and they arrived. Deputies found blood at the home's entrance and in the bedroom of the victim. The sheriff said the victim was brought to a hospital to be treated for severe head wounds, while deputies jailed Kang. Kang told deputies that he carried out the violent home invasion because he believed the target to be a bad person online. Kang also allegedly asked investigators how much prison time was associated with his crimes. Deputies responded with, "It'll be a long time before you play video games." I used to live with a musical artist who ended up becoming very famous. Unfortunately, my roommate's fame came at a horrible cost. I have to keep her identity a secret, but this kind of thing is happening to millions of people, not just celebrities. My roommate was always obsessed with her physical image. However, I tried not to criticize her priorities. She was always very conscious of what she ate and how often she exercised. She also always had an unhealthy level of perfectionism, so it sadly didn't surprise me when she started talking about how she wanted to be on Ozempic. This was way back when Ozempic was first getting popular for weight loss, and not just a diabetes treatment. But even then, the negative side effects were well known, so I was deeply concerned for her. At first, I tried to convince her that she didn't need it, but she never listened to me. That's when I tried to scare her out of it, saying how it makes people nauseous when they take it, and how it could slow down her digestion so much that she could end up with rotting, undigested food in her intestines. Sadly, no matter what I said, she believed she didn't have a choice. Just a few days after mentioning it for the first time, my roommate came home from her doctor with a vial of Ozempic in her hands. All she cared about was what strangers on the internet thought about her. The doctor started her on the lowest dose, and I urged her to take it in moderation, just once a week like the doctor said. But I believe she was taking more than the recommended dosage behind my back. I couldn't help but notice gradual yet significant changes in the first month. Her face was a bit slimmer, and it looked like the medicine was helping her shed those last 10 pounds she was always complaining about. I noticed one day that her dose had been doubled. I asked her about this, but she snapped at me, telling me to stay out of her business. From that point on, I was too scared to talk to her about anything related to the issue. All I could do was watch my roommate slowly descend down the Ozempic rabbit hole. What was once a healthy amount of weight loss soon turned catastrophic, as her flesh just kept getting ripped away from her body. It was also affecting her mental state too, as she withdrew away from me and started becoming obsessive over her Ozempic schedule. It was like something was eating her alive from the inside, but I knew where it was really coming from. That's when I discovered something that horrified me. I found several discarded boxes of Ozempic, and when I looked at their labels, I realized that they were prescribed from 3 different doctors. Suddenly, I realized that she had been scheming to get more than what was healthy for her. She was taking it multiple times a week, destroying herself in some kind of misguided search for beauty. I wanted to talk to her about it, even though I knew she might flip out on me. But then, I stopped seeing her altogether. I thought maybe she had gone to visit family or something, but there was no evidence that she had left. She had just been locked away in her room for days. I felt so guilty that I hadn't tried to help. So one night, I got out of bed and went to her room.
Please, please. I don't want to do it anymore. I've already done it twice today.
You liar! You know you need it. You know you want to be the hottest you can be.
But I don't feel hot. I feel like I'm dying.
That's because you still hate yourself. It doesn't hurt to shed a few more LBs.
No. My followers all said I looked better before. Even my roommate had.
Shut up! Are you gonna listen to that bitch or you gonna listen to your doctors? Come on, put the needle in. Just keep going. After you're done injecting that goodness into your body, you can share some and stick it into that pig who keeps telling you to stop.
Who are you talking about?
You know who I'm talking about. If you stop now, you'll be just like her.
That night, I realized there was nothing I could do for my roommate. She needed major therapy. I thought the best thing I could do was to get her put into some kind of psychiatric hospital, but I decided to put that off until the morning. I got out of bed early, as I still couldn't sleep well, and stumbled over to the bathroom. I pushed the door the rest of the way open, not expecting anyone to be in there. But then I saw my roommate standing right in front of me. I backed up, terrified. She looked even worse than before, with no flesh on her bones at all. It was like she was just a walking skeleton. Then, she took out an Ozempic needle as her devilish mouth gaped open. I thought I was about to witness her taking her last hit of Ozempic before dying, but the last thing I remember is her charging at me with the needle. This story was inspired by the rapid use of the so-called weight loss drug that has exploded in popularity this past year, and is part of the craze that has the public wondering which celebrities are on Ozempic. Ozempic is known to treat type 2 diabetes, but also has weight loss as a prominent side effect, so it is often prescribed off-label for this reason. It's hard to escape the numerous Ozempic before and after photos on social media of people who have seen drastic results while using the medication, and whenever a celebrity has appeared looking slimmer as of late, the Ozempic accusations always follow. There are a few celebrities who have spoken openly about taking the weight loss medication, but there are some that also deny such accusations. Either way, the whole thing is a sensitive topic considering the medication could cause more harm than good, depending on the public's perception of the quote-unquote victim. I have a son who I want to remain anonymous. He had a huge interest in video games growing up, so I indulged him and bought him every new video game console as they came out over the years. Fast forward 30 years, and my son is now 40 years old and still lives at home. He dropped out of college, never managed to hold a job for more than a week, and doesn't have any friends. All he does is stay in his room day in and day out, only coming out to use the bathroom. I regret just about every decision I made raising my son. All he does is eat 3 meals a day and game all day. I don't think he even sleeps. He's just always sitting in that chair, glued to it, staring at his TV screen. He doesn't even shower. The guy gave up hygiene for as long as I can remember. However, the last game I bought him was this freak show called Poppy Playtime. To me, it's just a bunch of creepy dolls. But he's obsessed with the stupid Huggy Wuggy character. I know it's supposed to be a scary game, but it's taken over my son's life. Sometimes, I swear I can even hear him talking to them. Eventually, I came to the realization that my son had gotten older, but he had never grown up. He was the same 10-year-old boy from when I bought him his first game console, and something about this Poppy game was drawing it out of him. This was when my wife and I finally drew the line. We refused to buy him any more games, figuring he would eventually get bored of Poppy Playtime and start begging for a new one. Yet, for whatever reason, Poppy Playtime had my son in a chokehold. We were forced to take a more direct approach and threatened to kick him out, but he guilt-tripped us about making him homeless. All he had was the game, and that was all he wanted. Months went by. Then months turned to years of my son continually leeching off of us. Every time some new chapter of Poppy Playtime came out, he would descend even further into it. It came to a point that we couldn't accept it anymore. My wife told me to confront him and do something about it. I spent a while working up the courage. Then I finally went to his door and knocked. As usual, there was no answer the first time, so I knocked louder. When I still didn't hear from him, I slowly opened the door. The rotten stench of his bedroom hit me like a tidal wave. I nearly threw up. I pressed on with my hand over my mouth and nose. Then I saw him like always, sitting in his chair with his eyes glued to the screen. Only that day he was mumbling to himself.
Son, it's time we talked about this.
Huggy Wuggy. His name is Huggy Wuggy.
Shut up about Huggy Wuggy and listen to me, damn it.
Huggy.
Alright, that's it.
Huggy.
There! No more distractions. So now we can have a conversation, right?
My son finally turned his head to look at me, but it wasn't his face that I saw. He transformed himself into a human version of that Huggy Wuggy thing. His mouth was wide open and smiling, but then the next moment, he was lunging at me. He wrapped his arms around me and started to squeeze as he tried to bite my face. I couldn't believe how strong he was. It took everything I had to keep his teeth out of my eyes. I thought he was going to crush me to death, but then all of a sudden, he collapsed. For just a moment, he collapsed toward the ground and his grip loosened enough for me to slip away. I ran out the door and slammed it behind me. My wife had witnessed the whole thing and was sobbing silently. I went to her and did the best I could to comfort her, but we both knew our son was long gone. We knew the only thing we could do to get him out of the house at that point was call the police. But we couldn't imagine our son surviving that encounter, nor the environment of prison. So, we gave up. If he wanted to rot in his room playing that video game all day, then all we could do was keep him from getting violent. Unfortunately, when I went to his door to check on him a few days later, I noticed that the foul odor emanating from inside was even stronger than normal. I opened the door and vomited immediately. Then once I could gather myself enough to go inside, I found him rotting, decaying in his chair, smiling just like before. Autopsy revealed that he had died from a stroke caused by a blood clot that likely originated from his leg due to him constantly sitting down. Our fight probably dislodged it, and if I had known that, I would have called for help. But I was too afraid of him. Now he's gone from playing too much video games, and I made it happen. It's all my fault. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a male who played video games non-stop for 73 hours and eventually had his organs shut down. The man's name was never identified to the public, but was referred to as DC in an article. He was allegedly a 25-year-old man who was presented to an emergency room and was dead on arrival. Paramedics were desperately performing chest compressions to try and push blood back into his brain and organs to try and keep him alive, but it seemed like their attempts were all in vain. DC was a college graduate, but never wanted to go to school. He worked a minimum wage job, but he was recently fired. He wanted to be an internet video game streamer, but no one was watching. He lived at home with his mom, where she still cooked for him, but she kicked him out when he was no longer going out to look for a new job. depressed and lost. DC binged on video games at the local internet cafe for days at a time. Sometimes he'd sleep at the computer and wake up to play some more. He gave up personal hygiene, friendships, and was obsessed with gaming and just couldn't stop playing. One weekend, DC played for 73 hours non-stop, glued to his seat. He barely ate any food or drank any water. He didn't even get up to use the bathroom. That's when he collapsed at the front desk of the internet cafe. The owner was oblivious to the fact that someone had fainted on his property. As 30 minutes passed, 911 was eventually called, but it was unfortunately too late.